Ready, steady, go!
Welcome back to the PPR Stock Report. You are Trent Seibel and Joe Marshall. That is PPR Stat Grinder and PPR Jesus. It's August 3rd. We're going to be talking about wide receivers today. This is the wide receiver edition of the podcast. First, we'll start off with a whole bunch of news, and the name of the news this week is injury. We'll start with the big one. Ezekiel Elliott's supposed to be missing some time.
Yeah, it looks like he tweaked his hamstring. It looks like it's only going to be about a week injury from what I've read so far. It just was kind of funny to see in the middle of the day, though. There was, of course, the unknown, and just to see everybody panic, and then everybody's asking, do I let Zeke slip? Do I take him? Just kind of fun to see the panic. I hate to see anybody get hurt.
You better not let Zeke slip.
Yeah. This goes right into, if you've been listening, me and Trent have the bet where Zeke, I bet he would slip 5 picks. He's down to number 9. Now, this news, I think this might get him down to number 11. I think this might let me win this bet.
We should have put an injury clause in.
We spoke about the injury clause. We didn't add one.
We didn't go back. But, man.
Isn't it just always something with the Cowboys, though? They're like the goddamn Kardashians.
Well, if you flip through the news, we've got all the big Cowboys. I mean, you've got Ezekiel Elliott. He's down with a hamstring injury.
Before we move on from that, what about Ezekiel here? Let's just talk standard redraft. Does this make you waver a little bit from your rankings? Would this be enough?
I don't think so. Not right now. If this truly is a 1-week injury, just a little tweak of the hamstring, they're being precautionary. And I don't just say that so that you guys don't drop his ADP and make me lose this bet. But if this truly is precautionary, I think that you just kind of stay the course. He's going to be the guy that he is regardless. Now, if it turns out with a bigger injury or this goes past a week, then I start thinking maybe we have to.
Everybody's out with hamstrings right now.
It's the beginning of the year. Their hamstrings aren't used to that, to all the cutting and all the workload they're getting right now. It's hot out there.
Yeah, and who knows? Sometimes these guys might just need a break, and the coaches have to put something on the injury report. Now, for me, I will say I have him ranked 11th amongst my running backs. I'm pretty low compared to the experts. Now, I'm telling you, if I had him at 5 or 6, this would be enough for me to say, do you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'll go with, tried and true LaShawn McCoy over him. There's too many question marks already surrounding him, with him maybe beating up his girlfriend, or maybe it wasn't his girlfriend at the time. And now this. And then just, like I said, everything on that Cowboys team is always just a mess. So for me, this would be enough to maybe have me drop him down a pick or 2.
And I haven't heard anything about that whole domestic thing. I mean, it's a night and day. The Adrian Peterson happened a while back, and it was
dominated the news.
Day. I mean, it was in the news. With this, the fact that you're just not hearing a whole lot about it just makes me think that it's really not as big of a deal as what they kind of made out to be the first day.
My gut feeling is that as well, but I'm not sure. I know we need to get to news, and I apologize. I'm kind of rambling. I think this opens up an opportunity for us to talk about the handcuff position in Dallas, which maybe was overlooked until now. But you have 2 veterans. You have
McFadden and Morris.
Yeah, McFadden, who was 4th in the NFL in rushing, surprisingly, last year. One of 7 running backs with 1,000 yards. And then you have Alfred Morris, who they brought in from Washington, who I think he's a north-south runner. He could run in that offense. He started his career out with 3,000-yard seasons. He cracked 1,600 yards in his rookie year. And now he's on the Dallas team with that great offensive line. Which one of these 2 guys do you see being the handcuff to own if you do draft Ezekiel?
It's hard to say with the way Dallas does things. I really think if Ezekiel goes down, you're going to see Alfred Morris doing a lot of the early down stuff. You're going to see McFadden maybe catching some of the passes. It's going to be kind of a commission, but I think that if...
So you're not really plugging either one of those guys in as a replacement. You're probably going to your fantasy bench instead.
I'd like to see what Alfred Morris does. If it's Darren McFadden, he's probably going to become my flex.
Okay.
But I think Alfred Morris, if they let him get the ball,
20 carries a game.
They let him, get his 20 carries a game. I think Alfred Morris in Dallas could do just as well as any other running back.
I see that, minus, of course, the catches. He has stone hands. But yeah, I see Alfred Morris as the guy taking the lion's share of the carries, and then McFadden working in like a third down role. I pretty much had the same assessment, but just I thought it was worth talking about just because we haven't really spoken to either of those backups.
Well, and people are going to be picking Elliott, so if you are picking Elliott, especially whether you move him down or not, you're seeing that the injuries can happen. He's not Superman. He's
Absolutely,
not immune.
He's a guy you automatically draft as handcuff. You take him a round or two early.
So, and whether it's Alfred Morris, Darren McFadden, personally, I'm taking Alfred Morris if I'm going to get one.
I think so, too. He's a little younger, a little bit more spry. Go on with the news. Sorry, I wanted to talk to that.
That's good to talk about. More injury news. I guess we can just roll right through the Cowboys. We've got Romo with a back injury. They say it's minor.
Is that a back injury or a fat injury?
It could be either. They had that picture of him, Fat Romo. I don't think that's a real picture for all you guys out there. Even
the photographer came out and said that no, that was just kind of a trick of angles, I guess.
Yeah, and sometimes they run with those waist pads that they have on also.
Yeah,
their protective armor or whatnot. He came out a day or so later. They had that video where they walked with the police officers arm in arm, and he looked like his regular self. But looking like his regular self pretty much means back injury Tony Romo. And it's really, especially if you want to be a Dez owner, nobody's really happy to be a Romo owner at this point. But if you're a Dez owner, you got to worry right now that he's already having back problems and we're barely in the camp.
Yeah, and then rolling right into Dez, it looks like, it hasn't shown yet that his foot is 100% either.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different thoughts on that. There's people saying his foot might still have a little bit of problems. There's
also
other people
working on the timing with Romo since they missed so much time together.
Yeah, and they missed a ton of time. He's saying his foot's 100%, which he would say that, whether it is or not. The coaches are saying he's just rusty, with all the time off.
Yeah, there was a video that surfaced yesterday, more of like a GIF file that surfaced of him trying to catch balls from the jugs machine, and he dropped like 3 in a row. Just really didn't look like himself. Again, these things are minor. It's training camp. It's not game speed. But some of these things, they just might be enough for us finicky fantasy owners to, downgrade. Maybe you see this news, and this is enough where you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Jordy over Dez.
Hey, I'm picking in the 9th spot in our main draft, APQ League. And if he's there at the 9th spot, I'm probably going to let him slip. If he comes back to me in that second round, I might pick him up, but Dez is a guy that I'm really scared of this year. He's a very expensive pick, and he showed
with
last
some risk
year
attached
that there's a lot of risk attached to it. So he takes boom or bust to a high risk, high reward. All that to like another level.
He does, and that's in an NFL where there's a lot of replacement receivers also in the early middle rounds that produce in terms of the receptions and the yardage. They're not going to be guys that are double-digit touchdowns. Dez is pretty much a lock for that if he's in there healthy. But I agree that this news coming out of Dallas, it just might be enough for me to bump every Dallas player down.
Yeah, especially if something happens with Romo. That hurts everybody. Josh Doxson, he's also in a walking boot. Supposedly this is precautionary. We talked about it a little off-air. This reminds you a little bit of the White situation.
Kevin White.
Last year. He
wasn't it Brashard Perriman also where they kept saying, 1 week, 2 weeks, and then we saw the walking boot. Very, very similar. I just read that he'll be out no more than 2 weeks.
It's supposedly an Achilles injury with him, and you know what? Achilles injuries hurt.
Now
I can't imagine running and cutting with.
He's not really on my redraft radar, regardless. But so many leagues out there, dynasty leagues. We do a 1-round rookie draft every year.
Which we're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, we have the rookie draft tomorrow. I'm excited about that.
Well, I'm curious about it because I want to see where he goes. I want to see what these guys, and this is a competitive league, and I want to see what these guys think as far as this.
It's a 10-guy league. He's going to be at the very end of that if drafted at all, in my mind.
I imagine somebody's got to take him. It's so hit or miss with rookies.
Tyler Boyd or Josh Doxson.
I would probably say long-term Josh Doxson, but it could burn me on that.
Okay.
If you remember, I really wanted to pick White last year, but he got picked before me, and I was very glad that I didn't because, it's basically a wasted pick, and we don't know what this walking boot really means. These coaches aren't going to come out and just say, hey, this guy's not playing this year.
I mean, it's definitely not a good thing. And that's my professional analysis.
Yep. So next injury on the list, this rolls right into my boy Devonta Freeman, who is not injured, but Tevin Coleman is. He went down with the ankle injury. They're saying the same thing everybody else is saying. It should just be a couple of days. But, I mean, it's still an ankle injury.
Yeah.
And it shows that these guys can go down.
Hey, you're a Devonta Freeman truther also, so this sits well for you.
Yeah, I like Devonta Freeman a lot this year. There's a lot of talk that Tevin Coleman's going to cut into his carries, but if he's...
I'm on my opinion on that. I just don't buy that at all. Devonta Freeman was such a difference maker last year that, granted, they're going to give different running backs other carries in other situations to give Freeman rest, but I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, this injury might not mean anything, but...
Yeah, I don't want to make mountains out of molehills either with all of these camp injuries, but if you're leaning towards a guy like Freeman, this is enough, to pull the trigger on. Go ahead and say yeah.
Maybe feel a little bit better. Adrian Peterson, he's been hurt. He's been out for a little while. Supposedly he practiced today, so he's getting back into it, which is good for anybody who's keeping Peterson, anybody's planning on drafting Peterson. There was never any real doubt that he was going to return. He wasn't hurt like a season-ending kind of injury or anything, but it's real good to see him back. One of the surprise things was this news about Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, this was something that I wasn't aware of. Maybe the news did surface in the spring, but I missed it somehow or forgot.
Well, they knew he sat out a little bit during the mandatory minicamp back in June.
I just figured that's because he's always hungover from partying so hard.
I mean, that would make sense. There's also... we talked about it before, but there's players that really don't need that so much. So when you got somebody, Gronk, he's a dynamic player. He does a lot. He scores a lot of points. He's awesome to own. But anybody who has him is worried about him getting hurt. I mean, that's his biggest downside.
Sure.
And maybe, you got to think that the coaches know that, and maybe they just don't want to risk it. So, we talked about it a little bit, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it when we get to DeAndre Hopkins. But sometimes these guys just might be quote-unquote injured instead of really injured, just so they can sit out of these mandatory things.
What was it, a pectoral?
Yeah, they're saying he had a pectoral injury. They don't really say what it is. He's supposedly 100% healed from it. He's, back in business, no lingering effects.
Stripper bit his chest or something?
I wonder... We need to keep an eye on that. He does a lot of those shirtless pics.
I wonder if it happened on the Gronk boat or the Gronk bus.
Oh, man. It'd be a bummer to have your season derailed because of a Gronk boat injury.
a stripper pole injury, that'd be terrible. I mean, it would be very Gronk-esque.
It would be terrible, but awesome at the same time.
Moving forward.
Hey, let's talk about a little bit of good news, I guess. Doug Martin is supposedly looking like Doug Martin. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily good news because Doug Martin always looks awesome in training camp.
Yeah,
every single year.
He came out gangbusters as a rookie. He looked phenomenal. That led fantasy owners to take him high in the second round, or the first round in his second season, I should say. And it was the same news that year, that his second season in the league, that he looked great in camp. Third season, same thing. He bust hard both of those years. Now, granted, last year, the news, this time, his ADP was rising and rising because of how good he looked in camp.
And we were talking smack.
You were talking smack. I had heavy shares of Doug Martin. You
know what? You did. Actually, now that you say that, you actually traded into him a couple times. We talked about him quite a bit, and I didn't want to believe the hype. I do remember you did believe the hype.
I did.
And it paid off pretty well for you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily the hype. It was just the cost. I'll tell you what I didn't believe. I didn't believe the Charles Sims hype. Now, granted, we're in full-point PPR leagues, so I see Charles Sims does have standalone value, but I didn't see him as a guy really touching, getting into Doug Martin's touches in terms of running the ball. He's a little scat back that might take on 4 or 5 carries a game. I didn't necessarily see him being a 15 carry a game guy, and that's where in last year Doug Martin early in the drafting season was be taken in the 8th round. I think it crept up even in the 5th or late 4th, but we had a couple early drafts, and I got him as late as the 8th round last year.
Well, right now he's getting drafted 19th overall.
Still a low cost for the number 2 running back overall, looking good in camp. It's basically an into the second round price tag. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal.
So Charles Sims, you're not believing in the Charles Sims hype this year either. He's looking pretty good again. He was the running back 22 last year, which
Here, I'll say this, Trent. I don't think you necessarily need to take him as a handcuff for Doug Martin if you have Doug Martin. Now, where I think maybe you should grab like an Alfred Morris if you have Zeke. I think Sims does have standalone flex value, but he doesn't blow my mind as an RB1 or an RB2, even if Doug Martin went down.
Charles Sims is basically going to be a guy that, like you were saying, he can be replaced by anybody on waivers pretty much at any time during the season.
I agree.
So, speaking of Doug Martin-esque hype, we're getting the same thing out of Terrence West right now in camp. Every single day you're hearing... Yeah, Terrence West. Every single day they're talking about him. He's supposedly killing it over there in Ravens camp.
I have read the same thing, but I'll tell you what. I wish we could just... Can you just take my voice out of this segment and replace it with the sound of crickets? Because that's what I wish I could hear right now when you're talking about Terrence West.
All right, let's do it.
You texted me with this information yesterday. I'll believe it when I see it. I did read that he looks great too, so maybe there's something to it. With Buck Allen there, with Justin Forsett there.
Well, Forsett's my big thing. What makes you think that West is going to replace Forsett? Unless Forsett is doing... I haven't heard bad things about Forsett. I've just heard good things about West. And Forsett has been the guy. He wasn't bad last year. He didn't have a knee injury, a leg injury. He had that freak arm injury.
Yeah, they drafted Kenneth Dixon also. This is news worth talking about because it's August 3rd. But, hey, good on him if he's looking great. I guess let's hope he makes the team. And, maybe he gets a chance if Forsett goes down.
All right, so crickets aside, moving on. J.I. back to the injuries here. He missed practice. J.I., he's a guy that you've been kind of high on. You were bummed out.
Whoa, pump the brakes. Hold on. Listeners, I'm not high or never was high on J.I.
Maybe hopeful is the right word.
We, in our league, our home league, we get to keep a rookie, and I have a J.I. alongside Kevin White and Jeremy Langford. So maybe I've discussed him more than the next guy, but he's not a guy I've ever been high on.
I think he's a guy that could do well.
I put the podcast smackdown on you right there.
I got podcast smacked. But smack aside, a J.I. could do well. If the opportunity arose, and the opportunity was there for a while, there was a lot of people that really thought a J.I. was going to be the guy down there.
Oh, yeah, we have 3 magazines in front of us, and he's the boom player in all 3 magazines from 1 month ago.
But Foster slipped in, and now... Foster could be the starter. According to a lot
I don't think it's a could be at this point. I think Foster is and will be the starter.
There's a lot of people saying that J.I. is supposedly still the guy, and even if a J.I. doesn't start the year as the starter, it's still Arian Foster.
See, I've kind of heard differently. I've heard that Foster just blew by his conditioning test, and he's been running with the ones and will continue to run with the ones. So... I think it's turning into less and less of, RBBC, a running back by committee, and I think it's turning more into, a starter and a backup. I mean, time will tell. They have a little bit invested in terms of a draft pick with the JI, and, basically Foster got a minimum type of veteran contract, so we'll see, but I really see right now, Foster's ADP is rising. That's it. There we go. There's a talking point I'd like to bring up. He's being drafted all of a sudden into the 5th round. Is that already too rich for your blood?
It's too rich for me because I just don't remember Foster making it deep into a season to the point where he's going to return any 5th round price tag.
Yeah.
It's to the point where if you had an over-under of 6 games before Foster's out with some multi-game injury, I would definitely put money on the under.
Yeah, Foster's a guy, I think, maybe if we talk about the 8th or 9th round, and I think in PPR leagues you're seeing guys like Frank Gore go around there, Jeremy Hill go around there, and then also your scat backs. We mentioned Sims, Theo Riddick. Those guys are good for easy PPR points. I don't love Foster's cost right now at 5. It might rise, Trent. If he's getting the touches in camp and in preseason as the number 1, I could see him going, I'd say, beginning of the 4th round into the 3rd round, and that's just too rich for my blood.
That's crazy. To me, Foster's value comes after that first injury, when he's going to be sidelined for a couple of weeks, and he's maybe going to come back, and then you get him for nothing, for peanuts.
He's also just kind of a weird dude. He kind of reminds me of Ricky Williams, and I seem to remember us having the same conversation last year.
Before he went down?
Yeah, I could see him just, bringing his veggie burgers and riding into the sunset and saying, you know what?
Done with football.
I'm done with football.
Didn't he get hurt twice last year? There was something going on early in the season, and it wasn't a big deal. And then he came back, and then he got hurt again.
Yeah, it was the preseason. He tore his groin.
The sports hernia.
Yeah, and then his ADP plummeted, and it looked like originally it was going to be about a 10-week injury. And I don't have it in front of me, but what did that? He only ended up missing
5 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I guess we should look at that.
It was right at 5.
But it was the same offseason narrative, and then the news came out that he wasn't going to miss as much time, and his ADP started soaring back up. People invested, and then they were burnt once again.
So I remember because last year I got him for nothing. I got him for peanuts after that groin injury. And then I had him for a couple weeks. He was doing really good. I actually traded him off and got Edelman for him. And then the next week, he was done.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. He's an interesting guy.
You would think with a savvy type of move like that, you wouldn't have finished 7th.
That wasn't that league. I finished 3rd in that league.
Oh, okay. Well done.
Yeah. So, Dolphins, we talked about a J.I. We also have to talk about Devontae Parker.
You don't tell me what I have to talk about.
I'll tell you what I want.
What's going on with Devontae? Let me guess. Hamstring?
Just like everybody else. Hamstring injury. It's the same thing. They're saying it shouldn't be a lingering thing. He's not going to be missing any time in the season. But Devontae Parker, he's one of the guys that I have as a real big breakout candidate. I think he's going to do really great. He's going to be teamed up with Landry.
Yeah, you look at his last 4 games of the season last year when they were really able to get him out there.
He might have been the best wide receiver in the last few weeks of football.
Yeah, I mean, he was up there. He was a very nice guy to stream.
Especially for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. He's, of course, a breakout candidate of mine as well, amongst many others. But I don't think this hamstring injury, nothing.
Nothing to really worry about right now. Like I said, if it lingers for a couple weeks, then maybe you start to worry. But for the most part, I'd be more concerned. You got this Tyler Croft injury. This isn't a hamstring. It's a hyperextended knee.
Is
That's
this
the
Laura's
tight end.
son? Laura Croft's son?
It could be. They're both athletic cats. This guy, he's the tight end for the Bengals. He's the number 2 behind Tyler Eifert. So my bigger worry on this, and we talked about it a little bit, Tyler Croft hyperextends his knee. If he misses any significant time, are they going to roll out with a number 3 tight end there? Or are they going to really try to push Eifert out there earlier than maybe he needs to?
I feel like this podcast is going downhill when we're spending time on the Bengals backup Tyler tight end. I don't think this is anything. I think Eifert might have been out a few weeks at the very most. No, I don't think they rush him back for this. They have another tight end I'm sure they can throw in there if need be. I don't think this is newsworthy.
Well, let's roll through the rest of the news kind of quick because we got wide receivers to talk about. Kendall Wright, he's got a hurt hamstring. Even with a healthy hamstring, I don't think Kendall Wright's really anything that anybody's worrying about unless you're in a 20-team league this year.
Yeah, he's just a name and a guy that I don't want to see on any of my rosters. I don't really have anything against Kendall Wright. It's just guys like this who kind of linger on. He had one really good season where he had about 90 catches, and he's still just kind of around. And, they have a receiver like DGB, which I'd love to see him take off. And I just feel like a guy like Kendall Wright's in the way.
Like he just needs to walk away.
Yeah,
walk away from football.
There's a couple guys like this.
He messes people up, too. He comes out and he has these killer weeks, like 1 or 2 good 24-point weeks, 26
Fool's
points.
gold. I know what you mean. Yeah, he'll have back-to-back weeks of 100 yards and 9 catches, and then you're like, oh, man, Kendall Wright is Julian Edelman, Oh, Kendall Wright is, a great slot receiver.
And you hold on to him for 5 weeks while he gets 7, 3, 9, 4, and
we should have a Fool's Gold segment because he's completely Fool's Gold.
Hey, he fooled me last year. We got Matt Forte back to practice. That's good news for him. And then
What do you say on that, Matt Forte? I've been hearing more and more strongly that that's going to be a real running back by committee. A 55-45 split with Bilal Powell. What say you, Trent? What say you, Stat Grinder?
I can't see them not letting Forte do his thing. It's similar to the stuff with Devonta Freeman, all them. If Matt Forte is going out there and he's being the Matt Forte that we're used to seeing, he's scoring points, catching the ball, and unless they have a significant reason to think that he's going to get hurt, I don't see why they take the ball from him and give him to somebody else.
See, I agree with that 100%. It goes in with my theory that, you keep the best players in the game the longest. Now, if you've paid attention to Matt Forte's career, he is not a great short yardage or goal line back, so I do see, Powell having a spot on the offense, but calling it a running back by committee, I'm not sure I'm going to go that far.
So hasn't Powell been more of like the pass-catching guy anyways around there? And that's what Forte is. So it doesn't seem like they really mesh so much.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I guess maybe he's more all around.
And maybe Powell was forced into that role because Ivory was pretty stone-handed, a la Alfred Morris.
Yeah, Ivory, he was good there. Ivory shined with Powell out with injuries, which is something else that could happen over there. And if Powell goes down, you've got to think Forte's value is going to skyrocket.
Ivory, you killed me with him last year. Remember the London game? He ran for about 170 yards. I hate that guy.
Ivory's a monster. He could be this year
Ivory's
as well.
a monster. I hope you edit that out.
I said was. I didn't say is. Ivory was, W-A-S, last year.
Let me piggyback on some running back by committee news. I'm hearing out of the Giants camp that it's quite the opposite. That they're not going to use the four-headed monster approach.
They're going back in time.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to give Rashad Jennings every opportunity to be a lead dog. And I'll tell you what, if you're taking a zero running back approach, Rashad Jennings, his cost right now... Nothing. And, with this type of news, with drafts really getting underway right now, maybe he gets up into that 8th round, but again, still that's nothing for a full-time starting running back.
Yeah, and you don't really see a whole lot of teams sticking with a single 3-down back kind of deal. So, anytime you get that news, that's got to be good. If you can get Jennings for nothing, why not take a leap on him?
Please wait.
Welcome back to the PPR Stock Report. We're going to talk about some wide receivers. We're going to go through the top 20 wide receivers according to Fantasy Pros, which they've got a kind of a general consensus of the quote-unquote experts. We're going to start with number 1, work our way down to 20, and then we're going to talk a little bit about who we think is going to break out this year, and then maybe talk about where you can get a little bit of value at the wide receiver position.
This is right in my wheelhouse, Trent. I love wide receivers.
This is the segment that he's been waiting for. Basically, every single podcast, I've been getting him to do these other podcasts first because this is what he wants. This is what he wants to build up to. So
I think I could win a league drafting 5 receivers in a row.
Let's do it. Let's see if you can do it. We'll randomly join some league and you do 5 receivers in a row and we'll see if you can win it.
Just give me as many receivers as I can have.
Some random Yahoo league. You'll have to come up with some kind of fancy 5 wide receiver name now.
Deep insight by PPR Jesus.
All right. So there's not a lot of surprise at the top of this list. Antonio Brown, pretty much the undisputed number 1, top to bottom.
This guy's an absolute maniac on the field.
And I actually did hear somebody the other day. I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, trying to get as much information as I can so we can pass it on to you guys. But somebody was talking about the argument for Odell to be number 1 over Antonio Brown, and they're not on my podcast feed anymore. Antonio Brown's number 1.
Yeah, there's not much competition, not only amongst the receivers, but across the board. He's the overall number 1 consensus.
So the only guy that could come close would be Julio. You love Julio.
I love Julio, yeah.
But Julio does have those injury concerns, and Antonio doesn't.
You're exactly right. That's 100% true. Do you know what, though? Now, where he doesn't have the same injury concerns necessarily that Julio does, Julio seems to always have just a little nagging injury. We're already seeing that in camp. He was back today. But, Antonio Brown has to deal with, Ben Roethlisberger. He misses a game or 2 a year, it seems like. But still, I don't have a real great argument for Julio for number 1.
I could throw the football in Pittsburgh and Antonio Brown still scoring double-digit touchdowns.
Now, if I'm going to try to campaign for Julio, it's They tied for catches last year. They both had 136 receptions,
Yep.
which was the second most ever behind Marvin Harrison. He had in the 140s, 142, I believe, 10, 15 years ago. And he did outgain him. He had over 1,800 yards.
Yep, he just had those 2 more touchdowns. That was the only thing.
Yeah. Now, that was a little bit banged up for most of the year, but, who's to say you can't count on that happening again? I have Antonio 1. I have Julio 2 as well.
So the one thing that I really like about Antonio this year, Martavis Bryant, who's possibly the biggest idiot in football, he's not going to be in there. And, basically the only thing he was in there was for catching touchdowns. So does that maybe give Antonio a few more touchdowns this year?
It's nice to think that way. I think it'll be spread out between Coates. I think Sammy Coates is going to end up taking that spot. And then, I think Wheaton's going to be a guy in and out of the slot role or, on 3 receiver sets. So it's Heath Miller's gone too. Martavis is gone. That's fine. I can buy what you're selling there. I can see, even if the receptions aren't there, I could see 2 or 3 more touchdowns.
And Sammy Coates, he's a guy we're not really going to talk a lot about because he's a little farther down on the lists. But he's a guy to keep your eye on too. He's been a lot of real good reports coming out of camp about him replacing Martavis Bryant.
There's a lot of Sammy Coates truthers out there, and I'm really starting to buy in.
They're saying he's going to be number 2.
Yeah, I'm easily taking him over Wheaton. I think we've all seen what Wheaton has to offer. He's a fine receiver, but I think the unknown is kind of sexy with Sammy Coates.
Yeah, and if you guys are wondering what our complete rankings are, they'll be posted up on the website. That's going to be www.pprstatreport.com. I'm going to have my rankings up tonight. Joe should have his up tonight as well, maybe tomorrow. And Wheaton is on there, and Sammy Coates are both on there. I've got them both pretty close. Antonio Brown, the last thing to say about him, he's got a really nice car that he's going to lose if he's not up there. He's got to beat Brandon Marshall.
There's not even a what-if scenario in my mind. He's actually the new owner of Brandon Marshall's beautiful white Porsche.
Yeah. So we talked a little about Julio Jones. He's our number 2 guy. We both have him at number 2. Like I said, he's very close. There's not going to be anybody who's going to be surprised if Julio Jones is the best wide receiver this year, especially if he's healthy the whole year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I draft number 2 overall in our main league. It's our 15th
You just picked that up.
Yes, I did. I made a little trade, a little draft pick swapping. I moved from number 4 to number 2. Paid a little bit of a price for it, but I think it's worth it because I have Julio head and shoulders above number 3, who is...
Well, according to them, Odell Beckham. This is where I veer off a little bit. It's nothing crazy, but they've got Odell as number 3. Some people have him as the number 2. I've heard arguments that Odell is being picked above Julio. Supposedly, somebody picks him above Antonio. I don't know why.
So he is pretty much a consensus 3. Who do you have at 3?
I actually have DeAndre at 3. I really like what he did with the revolving door of quarterbacks last year. DeAndre had better stats than Odell last year as well. Now, we did talk about it. Odell missed 1 game.
Yeah, suspension, no injury.
It was a suspension. It wasn't an injury.
But the timing of that suspension was a real bitch.
Terrible. He ruined people. That was, for most leagues,
Fantasy
he was
playoffs.
Out during the championship, wasn't it?
Oh, my goodness.
So,
yeah.
Championship or the playoffs at least. So, and that wasn't even like anything good. He got suspended because he basically got outplayed by Norman.
Now, I'm a huge fan of DeAndre Hopkins. Again, he's a guy I won largely with him last year. I drafted him in basically every league I was in. I took him, a couple picks around before where he was typically going, and I hit a home run. I strike out a lot, but that was a home run that I hit last year. I do have Odell 1 player above him. They had pretty even stats, 111 catches, 1,521 yards, 11 touchdowns for DeAndre. In 1 less game, Beckham was basically on the similar pace, 96 receptions, 1,450 yards, 13 touchdowns. So, it's the quarterback that's the difference for me. Eli Manning, we've seen what we could do. He's going to be over 4,000 yards every year.
He's gonna move into, 5th overall or something in
history
this year?
It's amazing. Yeah, he's up there in the top 5. It's like Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Tom Brady, Dan Marino, and then it's going to be Eli Manning.
How weird is that?
I think he's going to pass John Elway this year.
That's weird.
That is weird. He never misses time, though. He's kind of a mouth breather, and he'll fuck it, chuck it football.
He's a sloth-looking mofo.
He is. But anyways, I'm going with the consensus, though. I do have Odell at 3, and I have DeAndre at 4.
Listen, DeAndre might become this, but Odell, we talk about it almost every week, but he's got to be one of the most fun players to own. Yeah,
Absolutely.
You own Odell.
There's value alone in that. Turning on the TV every week, setting your lineup.
And there's fantasy football is a competitive thing, but a lot of people do it just for fun. If you're doing it for fun, I think that's silly.
He has a cool haircut, and he dances fun.
He does. He's the guy to pick. But
which Kardashian or Jenner is he going to end up dating? Write that down. That's going to end up happening.
What if he dates them all? Or what if he dates Bruce Jenner?
It's Caitlyn, buddy.
Caitlyn. I'm behind the times. DeAndre, I talked about DeAndre is my number 3. When it comes down to it, like I said, rotation of quarterbacks last year, he still put up crazy stats. He didn't have Eli throwing to him last year. Hoyer was probably his best option as far as who's throwing to him. He's got Osweiler. To me, Osweiler is an upgrade. A lot of people say that he's not proven, but you look at what he did last year. Look at Demaryius Thomas with Eli's brother, Peyton.
Eli's brother. You kind of threw me off there.
Yeah, the Eli's big bro.
Have you seen the new Manning commercial?
I love every Manning commercial.
Have you seen the new DirecTV commercial where
I have not.
Oh yeah, Peyton's at home. He's watching TV and he rings Eli up and Eli's in the locker room saying he's going to play. It's really good. Just Google it. It's a funny commercial.
All right, so check it out. But yeah, I mean, you see what's happening with Demaryius Thomas with Peyton Manning, which I get it. Peyton Manning had a terrible arm last year. But Osweiler came in, and most of Demaryius Thomas's touchdowns were with Osweiler. He was productive with Osweiler. And then DeAndre Hopkins, I imagine that you're going to see the same thing. I don't see any reason why Osweiler doesn't air it out. DeAndre picks up where he left off and maybe even does better than he did.
I think it was 5 of Demaryius' 6 touchdowns.
5 out of 6.
Or with Osweiler. Now, if you go and look closely, though, the overall production in terms of yardage and receptions was down. Actually, Demaryius, he was good for 7 or 8 a clip as far as receptions go with Peyton. That was down a little bit, but it was more efficient, and he was getting in the end zone the last 8 games with Osweiler.
But on the flip side of that also, Osweiler was playing on a team with the best defense in the league, so maybe they were throwing less and whatnot. I granted, you're going to get the same thing with Peyton, but if Osweiler's getting more touchdowns than Peyton, a little bit more offensive productivity, then maybe he's not going to be throwing the ball as much in general.
Yeah, they're close. It's kind of splitting hairs. Give me Odell.
I take DeAndre. AJ Green, number 5. I've got him at number 5.
I have him in number 5 as well.
So the top 5 are pretty well general consensus.
I mean, AJ Green's just captain consistent.
He's the same thing, yeah. Every single year.
You could bank on 90 and 1,200 for him. And I'll tell you what, with the loss of Marvin Jones, the loss of Sanu, with a banged-up Eifert, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised if AJ turns his 90 for 1,200 into, what we saw from DeAndre last year. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Listen, you have a banged-up Tyler Kroft as well.
I'm sorry, Tyler Kroft. I did not mean to leave you out. I thought we were editing the Tyler Kroft out.
Well, now we got to edit it twice.
Lara Croft is who I want to talk about. Can you put creeper? Is there a creeper noise you can add in?
I can look for a creeper noise.
Okay, we will.
All right, AJ Green, man, he's like you said, the Eifert injury may up his targets. I said the same thing. If you look at my notes, he's dependable. He's consistent every single year, and you got to like the Red Rocket tossing to him as well.
Now, by the Red Rocket, you mean Andy Dalton and not my puppy Rolo's penis?
Andy Dalton.
Okay, I thought so.
What is it with Rolo and the Red Rocket? Brandon Marshall, Jordan. What do we got next?
Number 6.
I'm trying to go off my list. We got to stick to Fantasy Pros here.
We want people to have a chance to win their league, buddy.
Then use my list. All right, number 6. I don't like this. Dez Bryant at number 6. I'm pretty low on Dez Bryant.
Who do you have at 6?
I've got Jordy at 6.
I have Dez at 6.
So you're right there with Fantasy Pros on this one. Dez, we already talked about it. Coming out of Cowboys camp, you've already got a Romo injury. You have Dez not looking very good. You got Ezekiel banged up, which I guess if Ezekiel's banged up, that probably helps Dez.
Maybe so.
But I don't like it. I don't like paying that price tag for somebody who just basically ruined people last year. Now, I get it.
See, I wasn't burnt by him, and largely it was because I had Julio over him. And last year, I think Dez and Julio were pretty close, number 2 behind Antonio Brown.
Dez got picked before Julio.
Yes, and I had Julio above Dez in terms of my ranking, so I'm not feeling the same burn that you are. Now, the reason I will campaign for Dez at 6, over, you mentioned you have Jordy at 6. Give me Dez because even though there's a couple hangups in Dallas, I get it. I'm a little bit worried about Dez in his foot as well. But I think Dez could be a guy. He could pay off and be the number 1 receiver. Dez is a guy. If there's a guy in the league that could score, 18 touchdowns, it's Dez Bryant.
Well, like I said, Dez Bryant requires Dez Bryant to be healthy, but he also requires Romo to be healthy.
True.
And I just can't see Dez and Romo making it through the whole season being healthy.
Where do you have Dez if you have Jordy at 6? Where do you have Dez?
I've got Dez at 8.
Okay.
So it's not super far off.
Just a couple guys.
Yeah, just a couple guys. They've got Allen Robinson as their number 7.
Okay.
They got him a little richer than me. I've got him at 10.
Me too. I think myself, you, and what I've heard from a lot of the other people in the fantasy world, I think people are just expecting a little bit of a regression from Robinson. What did we have? We have stats here: 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns.
Yeah, he had 80 catches last year. But you got to remember, Allen Robinson, his season was saved. He had 7 touchdowns in the last 6 games, and that's not probably sustainable.
Well, and I'll tell you what is also not sustainable. They were all of those yards and touchdowns were coming from behind. A high, heavy percentage of all of those numbers were, the Jaguars down by 2 touchdowns or more. So
they were trash time heroes.
He was the, Kelvin Benjamin of 2014. It was very similar. Now, I do think Allen Robinson is a talent. I think Allen Robinson is phenomenal. You see that yards per catch, 80 catches for 1,400, 14 touchdowns. I think that is tough to sustain. I've bumped him down. I have him as 10 as well. 7's a little rich. We're taking him over number 8, who is Jordy Nelson.
You talk about his stats. You always throw out the 20% regression. Even if you lose 20% off of him, though, at my number 10 spot, I feel like you're doing pretty good. Your number 10 spot as well. He's looking at 1,100 yards still.
Yeah.
So, and then 20% of 15 touchdowns. That's still 11 touchdowns. You can't be sad about that. Am I going to pay a number 7 price for him? I don't think so.
In PPR leagues, are you taking him at the turn at pick 10, 11, 12?
If he's there, if Allen Robinson and Dez Bryant are both there, that's going to be tough. I'm going to be so sad if I got to take Dez. Actually, on my list, I have Dez higher than him. But if those are the 2 that are there on the turn, I'm not probably taking either of them.
And you're going.
And then when they come back, I might grab one of them if they're there. If I got to pick one, gosh, it's going to be tough.
You got to live by the list, buddy. This is your list.
I guess you got to take a risk on Dez at that point if Dez is there in the second. But, yeah, I like Allen Robinson. I don't like him as the number 7.
Let's get on track here. Let's go with Fantasy Pros number 8.
Jordy Nelson. And I like Jordy Nelson a lot.
Jordy Nelson. I've got him about there. I think I have him at 9.
I've got Jordy as 6, so I've got him a little higher than Fantasy Pros. His new knee injury is concerning. It's not his old one acting up, which would be a concern in and of itself. But this is a new injury. The other knee. So he's got 2 crippled knees right now, and I'm hoping he's going to, the word is he's going to go into the season. He's not going to have any ailments. He's
Can
going to
I
be
go
Jordy.
on record something here? And we have a couple Packers fans in our circle of friends and people we play fantasy with. I'm a little worried about the Packers offense, and I'm probably completely off base here. I think what we're seeing with Eddie Lacy, I think that's going to – it feels a little forced. And now with Jordy coming back from the injury, he was injured all last year, and now he has another knee injury. Cobb had a really down year. If you watched, Cobb, he was injured last year too. He had a shoulder. There's just something I'm not feeling. I'm not feeling the vibe of the Packers offense. So I do have Jordy ranked 9th. I'll kind of piggyback off what you said. You were saying if Dez or Allen Robinson was there at the end of the first or the turn in the second, you'd skip. I would too. If I were there and, Jordy was my best receiver option, I might have to go and get my strength at running back.
Especially somebody like Devonta Freeman's there or something
like that.
I'm
just, I'm going to rank Jordy 9th, do my due diligence, but I have kind of a bad gut feeling on him.
See, I actually think the Packers offense is going to be firing on all cylinders again this year. I think Jordy's back. I think he was the missing piece last year. Supposedly, Cheeseburger Eddie is losing some weight, so we'll see what happens with that. But, at the end of the day, Jordy he has not had one non-productive year other than his injury there. And I think he's going to pick it up where he left off, and I think it's going to benefit Cobb too. Cobb is simply just not a number one wide receiver. He wanted to be paid as one. He didn't get paid as one, and he proved why he didn't get paid as one. So I think Cobb, Jordy are both going to see upticks this year, obviously Jordy, but I think they're going to be back to their regular selves. So moving on, they've got Keenan Allen as their number 9. I love Keenan Allen this year.
Love Keenan Allen. I'm a Chargers fan, so I'd love to see him repeat what he had going on early last season. I have him at 11.
Got him at 12.
Okay, so we're pretty close on him. He last year, now a lot of people don't realize this, when he went down, he was leading the NFL in receptions.
He was actually on pace to break records, like shatter the records with what he was doing as far as his receptions and whatnot.
But instead, he shattered his kidney?
Liver.
Gosh,
lacerated liver. Man, lacerated liver is something.
That injury was brought to you by Bud Light.
When somebody says lacerated liver, it doesn't like jump out of the page as a football injury to me. I mean, I know it happens. Lacerated liver to me means you got in a fight with ninjas.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I guess as far as me being a fan, I'm happy it was that and not an ACL.
Yeah, I mean, knee injuries, that's what kills these guys. Lacerated liver, he should be back.
No, I think the lacerated liver would be what killed them.
Let's rephrase.
Fantasy value. Kill their fantasy value. Okay.
Yeah. Lacerated liver could kill you, yeah. He had 120 catches already, man. He was gonna.
No, you're reading that wrong. He was trending for 120 catches. Sorry, I wrote that down kind of goofy.
You are right. He was trending for 120, 1,408. He actually had 67, 725, and 4. It was even highlighted for me. All right, so Keenan Allen, I think he's going to pick it up right where he left off, minus the lacerated liver. We both have him a little lower. I don't know that I've got him at my number 9, but you know what? Out of these guys that I disagreed with, Keenan Allen's probably the one I'd rather pay for.
Do you know, I'll tell you this. So I'm with you. I have Keenan Allen at 11. I have Jordy Nelson at 9. I'm going to stick to that ranking, even though I kind of told you some of my hang-ups on Jordy. Now, realistically, on my team, where I'm drafting early, I have a much higher chance of getting a guy like Keenan Allen. I like his price a lot more. Keenan Allen's going more into the second, early third round. I love that price more than, say a Jordy Nelson who might be between the 12 and the 15 pick.
And that's something that we want to talk about, but just bear in mind when you're looking at these lists and when you draft, please don't just look at a list and just go top to bottom, because you know what? Some of these guys, Demaryius Thomas might be a better wide receiver than Emmanuel Sanders, but if Emmanuel Sanders is the better value depending on where he's going in the draft, he's the guy that you want to target. You want to get your value at each
Where are we at? We're at Fantasy Pros number 10 now.
We are at Alshon Jeffrey. Moving on. That's your boy.
Alshon, he's my guy this year.
Your boy.
And, I'm not alone on this. It's a perfect storm in my mind for Alshon Jeffrey. Personally, I have him at 7, and I had to arm wrestle over putting him one over Dez. I stuck with Dez at 6. I have Alshon at 7. And the reason it's so high is, again, I think it's a perfect storm. You have Forte gone. I think they're going to struggle in the running game. Langford and co. Yeah. You have a bad team. That Bears team is not going to be good. Defensively, they're not good. I think they're going to be coming from behind a lot. I think you're going to... Jay Cutler, he does have a big arm. Like Eli, he is a mouth breather, but he has a cannon of an arm, and he can really zone in. He's proved over the years that he can really produce a number one receiver. I mean, we saw it with Brandon Marshall in Denver. We saw it with Brandon Marshall in Chicago. We've seen it already with Alshon. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Alshon, I have him this year the same as I had DeAndre last year as the guy who, he's already a stud, but, he takes the next step into maybe tier 1.
Hey, let's be real. Up there in Chicago, who else is going to be catching balls? It's going to be Kevin White is the only real competition he has.
Martellus Bennett's gone even.
Yeah, so you got to remember, they're expecting big things out of White, but he hasn't played an NFL football game yet.
That's very true.
So, I mean, Alshon may be what they have.
Alshon, he's looking at 15 targets a week.
Listen, Alshon he had 54 catches. He missed some time last year. He only had 4 touchdowns. That's the number that jumps off the page at me, is 4 touchdowns. Do I really think that he's only going to get 4 touchdowns this year?
Touchdowns are a hard thing to predict.
They're hard to predict, but who else is going to score touchdowns?
There's not anybody there.
So it's got to be him, unless White does some crazy stuff.
Maybe, hopefully, Jeremy Langford, because I think
that's
he's
your
my
boy
rookie
too.
keeper.
That's your boy too. Yeah, I think that out of Alshon, you're going to see, obviously, if he can stay healthy, you're going to see the numbers go up. But I think the big one, you're going to see more touchdowns.
Fantasy Pros Experts 10, me, PPR Jesus 7.
I got him at 11, so I'm pretty close with Fantasy Pros.
You're right there.
Let's go ahead and we'll take a quick break. We've gotten through 10. We got 10 more to go, so we'll take a break. When we get back, we're going to jump back right with the number 11 pick.
Sounds great.
Oh my God, look, it's coming back.
Welcome back to the PPR Stock Report. We just talked about the top 10 wide receivers according to Fantasy Pros, and we are going to finish out the next 10, starting with pick number 11. That's going to be Mike Evans. What say you about that?
I like Mike Evans a lot this year. I'm very high. It's going to be his second year with Jameis. I personally have him at 12. It's his third year in the league. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons to start his career.
And number 3, that's the third year is generally where you see a lot of wide receivers make that leap.
The third season is very much a leap year for wide receivers, and I can see that out of him. He's a guy I'm very excited about. I like his cost. Again, he's going early, mid-third round. He's a guy I really like. 74 receptions, 1,200 yards. Now, this is kind of odd. Only 3 touchdowns. That's a number that I see him tripling that. I'll write me down for 9 touchdowns for Mike Evans this year.
I don't know how he only got 3 touchdowns. He's big. And that's the thing. That's the narrative in Tampa Bay as well. All of their wide receivers are so big, they should be scoring touchdowns.
Vincent Jackson's huge. Safarian Jenkins, the tight end, that was newsworthy also. It looks like he's being demoted, might even being shipped out of Tampa. But anyways, 3 touchdowns, I think that's the only thing holding him back from his ranking where he is now. I think if Mike Evans scored 8 or 9 last year, he might be a couple picks up. But I like his value and I like his cost.
I like him too. I have him back at 15 though. I don't have him. I'm not willing to pay that price tag for him. My only knock on Mike Evans, I'm with you. He's going to score more touchdowns. I can't imagine him only scoring 3, but he misses games. He has those little injuries, groin injuries, hamstring injuries. He misses time. He missed 2 games last year. Which
hard to predict missed games, hard to predict touchdowns.
Yep. So otherwise, outside of that, he's a really solid receiver. I like him at 15. And like you said, he's grown with Jameis.
Yeah.
They've come up together. They're going to continue to get better together.
Vincent Jackson, 1 year older, 1 year slower. You got to rely a little bit heavier on the young talent. So
and Vincent Jackson's a guy that I had on my list, but then when you look at, he had a lot of one-catch games for the games that he was in there. I moved him out.
I'm going to give you a little prediction. What do we have? Give me his numbers from last year. What do you have? 74, 1,200, and 3?
Yeah, he's 1,206, so you're right in there.
I've got him for 90, 1,409.
All right, 90, 1,409.
Those are wide receiver 1 numbers. I'm pretty high on him.
And where did you say you have him at?
I have him at 12.
All right, so you got him a little higher than me, 1 spot lower than Fantasy Pro, so you guys are right in the same wheelhouse. Now, this is where both of us differ. They've got Brandon Marshall at number 12. They've got Mike Evans better than Brandon Marshall, Alshon above him. I like Brandon Marshall a lot this year.
I do too.
For one, I think people forget how good he was last year. And now, on top of it, Fitzpatrick signed, which is newsworthy as well.
I think people tend to think Brandon Marshall's a little older than he is. I think he's going on 32, 33.
He's got some injury concerns.
He does.
He was healthy. Last year he was doing real well, so...
109 catches, 1,500 yards, and 14. I mean, those are grown man receiver numbers.
Brandon Marshall, if you look at just his numbers, he shouldn't be
He
outside
outscored
of the top
DeAndre
10.
last year in PPR leagues.
Hey, Brandon Marshall's crazy, and he has his car on the line. If you, in pending injury, if you don't know that you're going to come out there, it's one thing to say I'm going to be the best. But if you don't know that you've been training hard, you're ready for the season, and you're going to be the best, you don't throw that kind of stuff out there.
Did you see him get all pissed off at Jets camp today and punt the ball over the stands?
I did not.
Yeah,
what was that about?
He just was fired up. He said the offense was practicing sluggishly, and he took the ball and he looked, maybe he can get a punting job as well.
Yeah, if everything falls apart,
now,
maybe a punter.
Okay, I have him at 8. You have him at 7. We're obviously a little bit more bullish on Marshall. And just so, let me ask you this: do you think these numbers on Fantasy Pros just haven't all the way corrected from the Fitzpatrick news? Now, granted, we had our receiver list before the Fitzpatrick news.
Mine was after the Fitzpatrick news, but the Fitzpatrick news is old enough, I believe it should be pretty well corrected. This was last updated on August 3rd, so it was last updated today.
Okay.
So they still have Brandon Marshall that low. I don't see a big change there. He's still got Decker behind him.
Again, the cost of early third, middle third, I really love that cost for him.
And listen, Decker's another guy we're not going to be able to really talk about too much because we're talking top 20. But Decker's a guy that could be a really good buy for people. You've had a hard time buying into Decker?
I'm not. He's just too handsome. I'm jealous. My wife's in love with him. I can't have him on my team. But I'll tell you what, he didn't have a single game last year that he played in where he was under 10 fantasy points.
He put up a quiet, outstanding wide receiver season.
What did we have, 12 touchdowns?
He had 12 touchdowns last year.
12 touchdowns, Eric Decker.
Yeah, 80 catches.
1,000 yards.
Yeah, he broke 1,000 yards, and he's right now at ADP of 53.
I would say I'd punch him in the face, but he's also like 6'4" with perfect hair.
I bet he's got
Probably
really
kick my
good.
ass.
I bet he's got really good insurance on his face too.
Oh my god!
So he probably wouldn't be too bummed out if you punched him in the face.
He's too handsome for me to draft.
He'd be cashing in.
He makes like Tom Brady look like a hobo.
He does.
All right, we're getting into maybe a different podcast here.
Yeah, no, I like talking about these guys that we're not going to really be able to talk about because, like I said, we're doing the top 20, but a lot of these guys are people that are going to be the value for some of these. And like I said, check out our lists if you want to see the whole
he'll
complete
be number
thing.
1 on my man crush list.
Even above Tom Brady?
Let's go.
All right, what we got next? We just talked about Brandon Marshall. All right, so they've got Amari Cooper at 13. I don't know if I buy this one.
Second-year guy.
Amari's good, but...
Where do you have him?
I've got Amari Cooper at the... where is he on his list?
You have him at 25.
Gosh, he's way down on my list.
That's pretty far down there. I have him at 20. He did crack 1,000 yards. I mean, I'll start with the positives. 1,000 yards as a rookie, that's a huge feat for a wide receiver position. I really like the progression of Derek Carr. I think that offense is head. I actually think the Raiders could make the playoffs this year. But I'm with you. This is a little bit bullish for me. I'd love to see him justify this pick. I love the talent coming out of Alabama. But 13, little rich for my blood. I don't love his value.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, he had a good season. He broke 1,000 yards. He only had 72 catches and 6 touchdowns. It's kind of a similar situation with him as what you're seeing with the Mike Evans thing. Him and Carr, they're continuing to grow together. They're getting better together. But if I had to choose between him being good and some of these other guys that I've got higher, I'm gonna cast my vote on these other guys. So.
Okay, I think you and I agree this is just a little bit bullish. 13 overall PPR on Fantasy Pros. And that's amongst many experts, so that's not just one guy putting his list up. So, I mean, that's kind of the consensus with him. Number 14, Brandon Cooks from New Orleans.
Brandon Cooks, I liked Brandon Cooks a lot more until I started hearing all of this news about Michael Thomas. Now, I'm not saying Michael Thomas is going to overtake Brandon Cooks. They've got him at number 14. I actually have him at number 14 also, so I'm like right there.
I have him at 15, so I'm right there as well.
He's the number 1. But this talk about Michael Thomas, I don't know. I guess it could hurt.
When you say the stuff about Michael Thomas, we're reading that he's looked as if he's the best player in Saints camp.
Yeah, he's supposedly the best wide receiver right now.
Now,
do I think that's going to happen? Do I think he's going to overtake him? I don't. But he could take targets away. What did they have last year as far as Brandon Cooks? Opposite of him,
Willie Snead, who got close to 1,000 yards.
And Willie Snead is still there. But now you've got Cooks, Willie Snead, and if Michael Thomas is what they're saying Michael Thomas is, he's going to get yards too.
And they have Kobe Fleener there. Here's my thing with Cooks and the Michael Thomas situation in the Saints. And, just take this from one guy. This is just my opinion. Now, I'm not too afraid of Michael Thomas. I'm not too afraid that they're getting Fleener in there, younger tight end. Drew Brees, historically, has really ever only supported one fantasy wide receiver in terms of being a guy you can count on every week.
The big value guy.
Yeah, the big value guy. He's never been a guy where, he has multiple receivers with 1,000 yards. And it's not because he's a one-trick pony quarterback.
It's because he's a good quarterback.
It's because he's a great quarterback. He feeds his guy. It's been Marcus Colston over all the years. Then we saw it kind of transitioning into Jimmy Graham. And then the last 2 years, we've seen it with Brandon Cooks. And then, those are the guys, they're going to see your between 80 and 100 catches. And then he'll have 6, 7, 8 other targets with 30, 40 receptions.
Because he can see all of them.
Yeah, he's so good that I think it almost hurts the wide receiver number 2 there. So I'm not going to discount Cooks at all for what we're hearing Michael Thomas. That's my opinion.
So what do we got next? They've got Demaryius Thomas. Now this, I'm a Demaryius Thomas lover. Demaryius Thomas is my Julio for you. So I'm not saying he's as good as Julio, but I like Demaryius Thomas the same way.
Let's say this. I'm not going to say he's not as good as Julio. He's not in the same situation as Julio. He's an excellent player. I have him at 14.
I've got him at 9.
You have him at 9.
I have him at 9, and so
tell me why, Trent.
Well, according to the highest that any of these experts have is 14. So obviously they don't have me on there, but I think Demaryius Thomas, you take his touchdowns out of the equation last year, and he was doing just as well as the next guy.
Stat line of 105 receptions, 1,340 yards.
His only thing that hurt him was those 6 touchdowns, which was his first time he had 3 years in a row with double-digit touchdowns.
It's almost a fluke, catching that many balls with that few touchdowns. Keyshawn Johnson-esque.
Well, I really think, and we've talked about it a lot, I think that the problem was Demaryius Thomas. He's a guy that catches the ball in the open field and makes a move.
The screen game's a big part of his game.
He makes a move and then he's out. He's gone,
And you don't think Peyton had the zip?
Peyton didn't have the speed on the ball to get it to him, which gave the extra split second for the defense to get on him. And Demaryius is a guy that I had, so I watched a lot of Demaryius games, and that's what I saw. I think that even a young quarterback with less experience that can get some zip on the ball is going to get it to him, and he's going to make those moves, and I think you're going to see those touchdowns go back in the double digits. I think you're going to see the Demaryius Thomas that we're used to. And you got to remember, this is Demaryius Thomas that some people were talking about being the number 1 wide receiver last year. At least top
before
3.
Peyton fell apart. You're exactly right. Now, if I am going to argue for Demaryius, I think where the downtick in his value has been is the unknown with the quarterback position. We have a carousel of quarterbacks with butt fumble Sanchez, Simeon, and then the rookie Paxton Lynch, and that is one of the uglier quarterback scenarios in all of the league.
Yeah,
but
I check it every day, and it hasn't been good.
But the quarterback situation in Denver last year sucked.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning sucked last year.
Nobody knows this better than
Brock
you.
Osweiler got paid like he was goddamn Joe Montana. He was very average at best, and he still ended up snagging 105 balls, 1,340 yards. So I hear what you're saying. I'm going to stick to I have him at 14. 9. If I had him at 9, that'd be above Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans. I can't put him above those guys, but I still like him maybe into 3rd round.
I actually have him above Allen Robinson, Alshon, and Keenan. I love all 3 of those guys. I really love Keenan Allen, but I would take Demaryius Thomas over them.
Okay, well, good for you.
So
good for you. I'll see you in the losers bracket, bud. No, I'm just teasing.
All right, what do we got next? T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton's another guy that I had last year. I'm a believer of T.Y. Hilton this year. I think that he's going to have a real bounce back year. He had kind of a bad year, according to what you would expect from the T.Y. Hilton. He did break 1,100 yards, but only had 69 catches.
Yeah, he's a high yards per catch guy. Now, you're right. That was with Luck out for a significant time.
Yeah, he was crippled up.
Yeah, those numbers it's kind of hard to judge. It's amazing that he still was able to get 1,100 yards. I like T.Y. Part of me thinks this is a little high for him. I have him. Let's see. I have him at 17. This is 16. Okay,
I've got him at 17 also.
Yeah, so we're pretty close. I'm just looking at the Fantasy Pros rankings, and the guy below him is what's making me think that this is a little bit of a high ranking. They have Jarvis Landry at 17, 1 pick below T.Y.
Listen, there's people that have Jarvis Landry low.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry had 110 catches.
Jarvis Landry was a monster last year, but it's like people just don't know what
little
Jarvis
factoid
Landry
here.
did.
Can I go factoid on you?
Factoid it.
First 2 seasons of his NFL career, Jarvis Landry has more receptions than any other player ever in their first 2 years. Did you know this?
I think I read that today in one of these magazines.
Probably my Twitter is where you probably read it.
I might have read it on your Twitter, but I think it was in these magazines.
Do you know what's funny? And then Odell Beckham Jr. is number 2 on that list.
Numero dos.
And they both played at LSU together at the same time.
Those LSU products. I've actually got Jarvis Landry and T.Y. Hilton back-to-back. I've got Jarvis at 16, T.Y. at 17, so I'm flip-flopped from Fantasy Pros.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on Jarvis. I have him at 13. 1 above Demarius, 2 above Brandon Cook. So I don't see a lot of regression at all with Jarvis Landry. I think he's part of their run game down there, and I think he's your third down, move the chains guy. Do I expect 110 catches? No. But again, 20% regression, put him around 90. I still like him there a lot as a weekly, consistent guy. You know, you're not going to see a lot of peaks and valleys with him. He's going to be 5 catches or more every week, and I really like that as a number 2 receiver on my roster.
Well, my only worry about him is you've got Landry down there, you got Parker down there, and then now you've got those 2 running backs, like you said. You've got Arian Foster, who can catch passes as well. You know, you've got J.I.
Few too many mouths to feed in your mind?
Yeah, you know, you might see that get spread out just a little bit too much to see the same numbers, but like you said, 20% theory totally applies here. You still are happy with Jarvis Landry on a 20% drop from last year.
Number 18, this is a guy I don't love. He's kind of on my do not draft list. I ranked him. Sammy Watkins from Buffalo. It's not the talent. He's injured, and he's Rex Ryan in Buffalo.
We don't even know what's going on with his injury
He's
yet.
just buried in Buffalo, and Rex Ryan somehow is a head coach still, and I guess, you know, these owners of these NFL teams love 7-9 teams. I mean, I guess that's why Jeff Fisher has a job. He's the king of 6-10, 7-9. Kind of the same thing with Rex Ryan. He's at 18. I have him personally at 25, Trent, and I don't see any scenario where I'm taking him this early.
Listen, I got him at 22, but you got to remember, that's the 22nd wide receiver.
Yeah, not 22 overall. Yeah.
His ADP, as of yesterday, was 32. Am I going to take him as a 32nd pick? There is no way I'm taking him. We don't even know what's going on with his ankle. I don't think that he's worth the 32nd pick anyways, even with a healthy ankle.
I like him a little bit more in standard leagues. I think he can score a couple long touchdowns. Tyrod scrambling around. 18, just rich for my blood. The very next guy on the list, a PPR machine, Julian Edelman, also kind of injured, but, you know, give me Edelman all day over Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, Julian Edelman at number 19. I've got him at number 20, so I'm pretty close on that. I had Sammy Watkins at 22.
I have Edelman at 16.
Okay, so you got Edelman up. And you've liked Edelman, but you've also talked a bit about Edelman as far as he's kind of a wannabe Wes Welker.
Yeah, I think,
and he just isn't quite Wes Welker.
I think the fantasy world wants him to be that, and I think a lot of us, and me included until I really got diving into the stats, I think we just thought he filled in for Wes Welker, but it's not really the case. He's only cracked 1,000 yards one season, and I mean, it's easy to forget Wes Welker was getting 115 receptions every year for 12 to 1,500 yards. So I think he's being overdrafted in some situations, but if we're just comparing Edelman and Sammy Watkins, give me Edelman all day long.
And I think that stat that you threw out there, that he only broke 1,000 one time, that's eye-opening to a lot of people. A lot of people, you tell them that, and they're like, that's not true.
Again, I mean, even guys in our league, and we've been in our league for 15 years, they just look at Edelman and say, oh, yeah, Wes Welker was doing that, and I don't know, little Pavlov's dog kind of thing.
And listen, he's missing Brady for 4 games also. I think that's not going to hurt Gronk a whole lot. I think Gronk's still going to get his. He's still going to Gronk smash. But Edelman needs someone who can throw.
Smash.
Edelman needs someone who can throw the ball to him.
We need a Gronk smash soundboard more than anything else in this world.
Well, I can make pretty much any soundboard happen. So
who do we have at 20, Trent?
20 is going to be Randall Cobb. This is going to round out the list, and this is a little disappointing way to finish for me. I'm actually going to say we're going to do 21 because I don't want to end on Randall Cobb.
Okay, you're just bored. You're done with Randall Cobb. What's up?
Randall Cobb, he's a top 20 wide receiver, and he does well when Jordy is there to take the pressure off of him. I've got Cobb at.
I'm close here. He's at 20. I have him at 23.
I've got him at 24 also, but So he's not too far off, but he's not a guy that I want to finish my podcast off. He scores points. There's no question about it. He scores points, especially when Jordy is there.
Hey, it's our podcast, okay?
Man, get a little touchy there.
Okay, I hear you. We could go one more. Randall Cobb. Maybe you don't want to end on Randall Cobb because we know what we're getting with Randall Cobb.
I still feel like I got estrogened just a minute ago there.
You got away from home tonight. You don't need that in your life.
Randall Cobb, yeah, that's pretty much it. He's a number 2 guy. Like we said earlier, he's not a number 1 guy. You got a healthy Jordy, which we're not sure that we have a healthy Jordy yet. I mean, he's higher on the list, but without Jordy, or if you don't have Aaron Rodgers doing the Aaron Rodgers thing, Cobb is worthless.
Hey,
he doesn't carry the team.
I've told you I have, I'm a little hesitant on the Packers offense in general. Same goes to Cobb. He's definitely not on he's on my buyer beware list. He's not on a do not draft list. He's on my buyer beware list. Let's go to guy number 21. Now there's a little unknown with him. He's getting to step into a lead role this year. And in his one real opportunity in that lead role, he flourished. Who's number 21 here?
Golden Tate. And he's a guy that I really like to talk about because if you really look at the numbers, when Calvin Johnson was not playing, Golden Tate was flourishing. Calvin Johnson is out. Golden Tate is putting Calvin Johnson-like numbers up.
And he really was.
So
there was about a 5 or 6 week span in 2014, and Golden Tate, I mean, he was getting 8-9 catches a week. I think he had 500-yard games out of 6. I mean, he was on fire. And even last year, quietly, now the yards per catch was awful, but he had 90 receptions last year, quietly.
Listen, they brought in Marvin Jones. They didn't do anything else with wide receivers in the draft. So they think that he's going to take the place of Calvin Johnson.
He's a number 1.
Yeah, they trust him at the number 1. He's shown in the past that he can be that number 1. And where you're going to get Golden Tate, he could be one of the better wide receiver buys in the whole draft.
He's my 20.
I've got Golden Tate at 23.
Okay.
When I first did my list, I actually forgot to put him on because I purposely didn't put him in there because I really wanted to look at where I wanted him because of that unknown. Then I had to slide him in and look at it. But yeah, Golden Tate, he's a guy that you can get probably for a pretty good price, and he could be a wide receiver 1 for you.
He's an end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th round type of guy.
And he had a mediocre year last year. Nothing crazy. But he also
still,
had
PPR,
Calvin.
90 receptions, and he did that quietly. So you get a guy like that, 90 receptions. Again, I mentioned it with Jarvis Landry. It's just a consistency factor. He's not going to be your number 1 receiver probably, but if he's your number 2 or 3 even, you're going to get a guy who's racking up 5 catches every week.
But he could be your wide receiver 2 and put up wide receiver 1 numbers.
He could. If you take what he did over that 5 or 6 game stretch in 2014 and extrapolate that over 16 weeks, very well could be.
So, real quick, we talked about our top 21. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who is your biggest breakout candidate from the wide receiver core, your top 50 wide receivers this year?
My biggest breakout candidate, Dante Moncrief.
Dang.
Dante Moncrief, he's being picked as the 25th overall wide receiver.
I was going to use Dante Moncrief. Now I'm on the spot.
So Dante Moncrief is a guy in Indy that I could actually see leading that team in receptions. I like T.Y. Hilton. I'm not down on T.Y. Hilton by any means, but I don't see him as being a guy that gets over 80 or so catches. I think Dante Moncrief can really step into that third down role, moving the chains, and catch around 80 plus balls.
Now, does Dante Moncrief have the potential to go to surpass T.Y. Hilton?
They're different players, Trent, so I don't necessarily think he's going to surpass him. But I do think he can equal his fantasy output for a lower cost.
You can't be sad about that.
I can't be sad about that.
So Dante Moncrief was my breakout candidate as well. He's a lot of people's breakout candidate, to be honest. I got 2 other guys that I was talking about that were what I said soft breakout candidates. They've already got 1,000 yards. That was Amari Cooper, and I talked about Doug Baldwin. I think Doug Baldwin's a guy that moves forward, though. When I say breakout,
sure. No, I get what you're saying. For instance, I know exactly what you mean, Trent. I had DeAndre Hopkins as a breakout. Everybody already knew DeAndre Hopkins was good. I meant next level, tier 1 type of guy. And I think you're kind of feeling the same way with Doug
Yeah,
Baldwin.
I think Doug Baldwin. I think Seattle. They're still a run team, but you're starting to see Russell Wilson mature. He's getting better throwing the ball. They want to throw the ball. That's why they brought in Jimmy Graham. They've got these receivers now. They got Tyler Lockett. I think Doug Baldwin. Where you're picking him up right now, you may pick him up and get a wonderful value out of him. And I think next year he might be a guy that you're drafting in the second round.
Yeah, I could see that with him. I mean, he finished those last 8 weeks of the season off gangbusters. I know we're running short on time here. There's one receiver we haven't brought up that I really think we need to take a second to talk about in terms of value. Just tremendous value. Larry Fitzgerald being taken as a 27th receiver overall in PPR leagues.
And I've got him at 28 on my list.
109 receptions last year, Trent. 1,215 yards, 9 touchdowns on a passing offense, the number one offense in the league last year. What is this? Why is he down so far?
Listen, Fitz has some of the strongest hands you're going to see. He's got Odell-type hands. He catches, you've seen him on those commercials, catching one-handed passes. He's good at what he does. The only thing that's going to hold him back is obviously his age, but, I mean, he's staying in tip-top shape, so he hasn't let that slow him down yet, but there's a lot of mouths to feed down there. Now, that being said, you pick him up at a relatively low cost, and you got another injury to John Brown or Floyd, and now you've only got 2 mouths to feed, and I think if you saw the beginning of last year was he really did good at the beginning of last year, and he kind of slowed down towards the end. You also had Floyd's hand injury for the first 5 games. He stayed in. He still played. He wasn't very productive. As soon as he started picking it up, you started seeing Fitz come down to earth a little bit just because of those mouths to feed.
Do you know, my assessment here is on why he moved down. I think people are expecting a little bit more of an emergence of John Brown. He's been compared even to Antonio Brown. Now, of course, I don't think anybody expects that type of return on him. But, I mean, maybe it's what we're seeing with David Johnson. I mean, David Johnson's going number 1 overall in some leagues. I don't really worry about David Johnson cutting into Fitz at all. David Johnson can catch the ball, so maybe there's a few targets taken away there. But I don't see David Johnson as a 1,500-yard runner. I see David Johnson as more of a guy who ends between that 8 and 1,100 yards range, but then tacks on 500, 600 yards receiving. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity for Larry Fitzgerald on a team that throws the ball 40-plus times a week.
All the time. So,
yeah.
And where he's going in the drafts, people are worried about him. He might be the best buy out of the whole draft.
He's looking at the list. He's probably the best buy I see.
Now, I want to talk about one other guy as far as the breakout, and then we'll close it up. Devontae Parker.
Okay.
Devontae Parker he's got the potential to be a guy that breaks out harder than anybody else.
He does.
Right,
we saw a lot from him at the end of last year. I almost felt cheated that we didn't get to see him all season at full strength.
You were waiting for him for a lot of last season.
Now, he was my rookie draft pick last year in our one-round rookie draft, and I held. Eventually, I had to give up on him, and I'm sad that I did because I wish I was keeping him into this year, and I am not.
Well, he's happy because as soon as you did that, he started being good.
Yeah, that's very true. No, he's a guy that I think people are really watching closely, to see what they have in him.
In his last 3 weeks last year, he had 13 catches, 286 yards, 1 touchdown. So, and that coming from a rookie, he really stepped it up, and I think he can build on that.
Hey, and that's coming. He's a rookie, and then he's also lined up next to a receiver that caught 110 passes. So he's doing that as
the number 2 guy.
And really, they had Lamar Miller. So honestly, number 3 at best in terms of targets and touch opportunities.
And where Devontae Parker's going in these drafts, if he breaks out, you can pick him up late in the drafts. You got to be feeling real good about that. So that's going to wrap it up for us as far as the wide receiver rankings go. Join us next week. We're going to be talking about the quarterbacks, and we're going to be ready for actual football games. Our first game is Sunday. So
I can't wait. Yeah, the Hall of Fame games this Sunday. We have Packers versus Colts, baby.
So next week we're going to have real, actual football news. So
actually, there's not a weekend that goes by from here out until February without football.
Best news ever.
Best news ever.
All right, guys. Catch us on our website, www.pprstatgrinder.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Till next week, peace.